What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Strength Classroom. Today, I have a very special guest. It's someone that has come up in my comment section a lot anytime I mention the word sandbag. And today, I have Cody from the Stone Circle. Go check out his channel right now. Pause this. Go into the YouTube search section. Type in the Stone Circle. Videos all about sandbags. He has a couple of programs that he put together. I did like a semi deep dive on his channel before doing this interview. Everything is really well done from the perspective of giving the information and just how his videos visually look. They're always a good time to watch. So welcome today, Cody, to the Strength Classroom. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you. I'm honored to be here. I appreciate it. I'm doing good. It's a nice sunny day here. Just recently moved a couple hours into the mountains, so the
Oh, wow.
view on the other side of the window is just pine trees. It's nice.
Nice. That sounds
Yeah.
beautiful. All right, so we'll start off. So this is it's such a cookie cutter question, but I feel like sometimes it's important to ask these questions to people. So
Sure.
how did you first start training, and were you training for anything specifically? Like, what were the reasons that led to that?
Yeah, sure. So I started back, I think it was the end of 2012. I had just finished high school like a couple years before that, and I started to notice this slow creep set in. I didn't have anywhere to be really. I was going to college online. I didn't have to pay rent, and I wasn't very active. And I started to notice that as the days went by, I felt it was harder for me to get out of bed every day. I'd sleep later. I'd go to bed at a normal time and sleep like 12 hours. And for some reason, that just kept getting worse. And I wasn't sure what was wrong. I had done sports when I was younger, but for the first time, I was just super stationary all day. And so I went to my mom and I was like, hey, what's wrong? Because I don't know, I was still living with her. And she said, you should go run. And that sounded really counterintuitive to me, the idea of going and making myself more tired when I was already so tired. But I took my dog, Rocky, he was a black lab, went and did a couple miles, came back. That night, I went to sleep as usual, woke up after 8 hours, and I was ready to go. Just that one run completely transformed my life. From that day on, I never stopped. I haven't stopped training at all. After about a year, I got into calisthenics. I had a pull-up bar in my basement and just did push-ups. After that, got into lifting weights for a little while, and then it was sandbags after a couple years. So that's how it
Okay. Oh,
started.
wow. So that soon after working out, was it sandbags?
Uh, I started sandbags after it was like 6 or 7 years, I think, of training.
Okay.
So it,
I
it
could.
was a while first, maybe 8 years. I started right about the beginning of 2021. So I guess that's a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
And question, was that due to COVID?
No, it was I read a book called Dinosaur Training. I don't know if you've read
Okay.
that one, but
No, I've never heard
it's
of it.
it's a good book. It can be hard to read at points because he's a very opinionated guy, but he has a way of writing that just makes you super motivated. And he talked about going and lifting odd objects and uh, curling like thick bars and stuff. So after I read that, I instantly bought an axle bar and then got my first sandbag soon after that. The first one I just went and bought a canvas thrift store bag. It said "Mom's Best Day Out" on it. I remember it was funny, and I just filled it
Yeah,
with
my friend's
rocks
son
and
was like that too.
yeah, filled it with rocks and just started throwing it around, and the rest is history, really. I got
What
into
kind
stone
of
lifting for a while and sandbags after that too. So
So once you came across that book, like your training, I guess for a lack of a better word, became like odd in a way, like
yeah,
anything that's like you said, thick bar, so that's gonna like strengthen your wrists and
yeah,
forearms, all the muscles that people don't consider, let's say, aesthetically pleasing, but they can develop a lot of qualities that lead to a whole bunch of other avenues, whether it's powerlifting and anything, but strongman, you
yeah,
name it, right?
yeah. They think it's not aesthetically pleasing, but once you get it, I think it is. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no, and
I
it's all a matter of perspective.
yeah,
If you're a competitive bodybuilder, the smaller your joints look, it makes the rest of your muscles pop for like that
true, yeah,
classic look. But for
good point.
someone that wants to in any type of combat sport or strongman, it's going to strengthen those muscles that are responsible for being better at that sport. Grip,
Yeah.
neck, traps, all that stuff, right?
For sure. Yeah, it was so basically I I did the calisthenics, or I did the running, then the calisthenics, then I started trying to lift weights. I started as a 5'8". I'm still 5'8", and I was just 115 pounds. I was tiny,
Okay.
and I couldn't seem to build muscle or do anything. I was stuck at that 115 for a couple years, and that's when I got my first barbell. I started working on the deadlift, and I got obsessed with deadlifting. And I went on this massive bulk. That was the other problem, obviously. I wasn't eating enough, but I think I bulked up to like 160. I got really fat, and then I just worked on the deadlift the whole time. And at the end of that, I cut down to a lean 135, and I got 405 to my knees, but I got 385, pretty easy rep. And having that the deadlift guiding my training, it added a lot of mass. I was still doing other stuff too, but my main focus was I would just come in, do like 10 heavy singles. It was probably the dumbest program ever, but I just really liked deadlifting, so I'd do a bunch of heavy singles and do that every week, and I somehow put on a bunch of muscle. After that, I started to follow the shiny objects, you might say. Those videos about the 10 best rear delt exercises or all that kind of stuff, and I thought, I'm done with deadlifts. I'm going to be a bodybuilder guy. And that led to me basically being plateaued for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. I didn't really get stronger. I tried different deadlift variations. I'd go and do Reeves deadlifts because I saw Eric Bugenhagen doing them behind the back.
You like hold the plates on the outside?
Yeah. I did all these weird things, and I would get to a certain point of strength, and I'd be like, okay, this is hard now. I'm going to switch to the other exercise. And I'd go right until that point where it was hard again. And it eventually, like 6 years later, I was 142 pounds. I had put on 7 more pounds of muscle in that time with the goal of building muscle. So I was obviously doing something wrong. And that was when I read Dinosaur Training. And within 2 years, I was up to a lean 160. And so something about the sandbags just, it changed everything. So.
Well, they whenever you do odd things, they stimulate your muscles in the way where you don't really feel that classical pump.
Yeah.
So I guess for some people it's hard to gauge whether their muscles are being engaged.
Yeah.
But even with something like kettlebell snatches, I never would have thought that would be hitting my lats in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But I do notice that's where I get a lot of the size from when I do have a certain period of time where I am doing kettlebell snatches. So, but they never get sore while I'm actually doing them, right? So I think for people that don't understand this training, they're not getting that instant feedback. Whereas if you do a set of bicep curls or lateral raises or whatever, you feel it sore. So in a beginner's head, it's like, oh, it's growing now.
Yeah.
So with sandbags, it's like you just have to it's a corny thing that you just have to trust the process.
Yeah.
If the weights are going up, the reps are going up, the volume's going up, it's going to grow you somehow, some way.
Yeah, definitely. I remember being like that too. I had a friend back when I was kind of first getting into lifting, and I remember talking with him about how dumb people were for doing big, heavy compound movements because they weren't hitting any one particular muscle. Because I thought, it has to hit one thing or it isn't doing anything. But then you realize what muscle does a sandbag work? Well, it kind of works all of them in a way.
Yeah.
There's a good. What's that?
Simultaneously, basically.
Yeah. There's a good thought experiment that I like to do, and if you can imagine that you're someone who has never heard anything about lifting weights. Say you're just a random guy off the street, has never seen social media, has never heard any information at all about any of it, and you saw 2 people. You saw one guy who's on a lat pull down and he's doing a set with maybe 1 or 2 reps in reserve, kind of a popular thing right now. You see that, and you think, okay, that's probably going to build some muscle, I guess. And then you see the guy with the heavy sandbag that's bigger than a full-grown person, and he's carrying it, and he's huffing and puffing, and he's walking down the street until the point where it falls out of his hands and he's on the ground gasping for air for 5 minutes. Just if you didn't have all the information that's going around already, if you didn't have the bias that's kind of been pushed on you, obviously the guy lifting the sandbag would seem like the one who's going to build more muscle. It just makes sense. But it's hard to accept that when you're constantly in this loop of, well, you got to isolate the muscle, you got to leave reps in reserve, you got to all these little things that really don't matter in the grand scheme of things. I think the main thing is just effort and intensity, and that's what a sandbag gets you, and that's why I think it works so well.
Yeah, I feel like it's because now this is not true, but in terms of mainstream, in terms of fitness, in most people's mind, bodybuilding came first
Mm.
because like powerlifting, strongman, things like that, they were very, very niche, especially like pre-internet.
Yeah.
So you're right. People's preconceived bias is that it needs to be emphasizing or isolating one particular muscle group, one, maybe
Hmm.
two. But other than that, it's not hitting a muscle specifically. So how could it grow? But that's a
Yeah.
very good point you just made. If someone has zero knowledge whatsoever, they would think the most muscle is going to be built by lifting up the biggest, heaviest thing and giving the most amount of effort to it, right?
Yeah. It
I
seems
think
like it
that's
would.
also why people I think that's mostly why people shy away from sandbags. Just they're hard. Let's be
Yeah.
honest. The first time I picked up one that was 150 pounds, I
Yeah.
was like, "Holy shit, this is really heavy!" Like,
Yeah.
like way heavier than I thought it would be. But just for the fact that it's so compressed in one tiny little small area, the
Yeah.
sand kind of moves around. So you're maneuvering it from such a different way than you would a dumbbell or a barbell or a
Hmm.
kettlebell. It's just different.
Yeah.
But you said so then you moved into sandbags around 2021. Now to lift with sandbags and enjoy lifting with them is one thing, but what motivated you to then start the channel?
The YouTube channel. That's a good question. How far back do you want to go?
As far as you're comfortable.
Okay, well, when I was younger, I was in bands. I played guitar and I sang. I did that from the age of 14. I played guitar before that, but from the age of 14 until 22, 24, somewhere around there, I was in bands all through high school. I was touring around and stuff. I knew that's what I was gonna do. That was my life's purpose. I was gonna be in a band, and I wasn't gonna have to work or anything like that. And so eventually, 2014. Sorry, I started playing in bands in 2006. I moved to a big city in 2014. That's what I meant to say, for the band, so that we could try to get more exposure and make it or whatever. I moved to the big city, got a job and everything, and I thought, you know what, this is fine. I don't mind working the job I don't like because I'm gonna be a musician. It's gonna pay off eventually. Eventually, the band broke up, and I was stuck working a minimum wage job, and I thought, I don't have a purpose now. I can't just keep doing this. And so I actually ended up living in an RV for a couple years. That was like the next step, which was completely unrelated. But after that, I went back, got a minimum wage job again, and found for the first time that I was sitting there at this job, and I thought this could be it. This could just be the rest of my life. I worked at a dog kennel, so I enjoyed it. I got to be with dogs, but at the same time, 6 a.m. Climbing into upper kennels, cleaning it after a puppy was in there overnight is not the most enjoyable thing. I remember just having to wrap the dog in a towel so that I could get them out of the kennel without getting all messed up myself, and then I'd have to climb in there all, yeah. And so the thought of that just being it forever was just the worst feeling. And I started to, I kind of started to get depressed for a while there. I'd go to work in the morning, feel really upset. I'd have to go out in my car just multiple times and just scream because the thought of this is my life forever, it started weighing on me. And eventually I just thought, I'll just make a YouTube channel, whatever. I'm not sure exactly why I started, but for some reason I just did. I liked fitness and started making videos. And it was a good 6 months, I think, before I actually had anyone follow the channel. I was just doing like long workout videos, just playing through. And then I started this thing called training back every day, where every single day it actually went on for over 800 days, where I was doing some kind of back exercise every single day. And I got to like 200 subscribers, which isn't very much, but it represented this small amount of
At the
hope.
beginning, that's a lot.
Yeah, it felt like a lot. Yeah.
Like when you have
And
absolutely not, like I remember when I hit 1,000, and
yeah,
that felt like I had the most amount of subscribers in the
yeah,
world. When you
yeah,
start from zero, when you get to even 100, 200, considering no one knows you,
yeah.
it feels like you've accomplished a huge milestone.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I still didn't really see myself as making it on YouTube or anything like that. I just thought this is something. this is something that represents a potential for the future that isn't just this job forever. And that, that small spark eventually grew and led to me. I saved up for a while. I quit that job and I got my personal training certification. I thought I'm going to go be a personal trainer, all that. I kept making videos during that time and everything. I walked into a commercial gym to apply or whatever and instantly realized, oh yeah, I don't really like these places. I've never liked training at gyms. I've always liked training at home. And the trainers that were there, they all looked miserable. They looked just as miserable as the people that I had been working with before. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to do that. So I ended up making like my own animal care business because I miss the dogs and everything. But just throughout that whole time, I was making videos, and it was just this guiding force of this is a potential for something more in the future. And just having that, I think that's an important thing to have, especially if you're stuck at a job you don't like or trying to make your way when it's kind of hard to make it.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a guess at this next question, but the stone circle, and this is a completely wild, I wouldn't have guessed this before you told me about the band.
Hmm.
Is that influenced by music, the name? Was that the name of your
Um,
dance somehow, or is just
it's
something you
a
came up with?
I guess you could say it's influenced by music in a way. I was really into bands like High Lung and Ensiferum Elevati, like folk metal stuff, and
Okay.
they're like making music that just made me think of stone circles. And so I thought it
Okay.
was cool, and I thought, hey, I'll make it called the Stone Circle, and then everyone who's in it can be part of the Stone Circle. I never actually really said that after
Okay,
that,
okay,
but
okay.
yeah, it was just a
That's
cool
a
thing.
cool name.
I had a bunch of stones in my backyard, and I used to put them in a circle, and then I would just like pick one up and carry it around the circle, and so I had this. I just thought it was cool. I don't
No,
know.
that's a cool name because it was taking me a couple of minutes to, not minutes, but until we just discussed it now. I don't know why
Yeah,
I said minutes, but I was like, he uses sandbags. That name would make sense if he would lift up like Atlas stones and stuff like
hmm,
that, right? I'm like, so there has to be another reason as to why that's his name. But
yeah,
that's a good explanation. I like connections where, because there's a lot of like popular YouTube channels where I feel like people strayed away from having like a channel name and they just
hmm,
basically made it their name. So like Jeff
yeah,
Nipper, Eric Bugenhagen, even Alex Leonidas used to
yep,
have a name. Now he just uses. So I feel like that's the trend.
yeah,
And I've never wanted to go in that direction because the whole identity of my channel was that I was a teacher and I worked out, and so I just put the two together, strength
yeah,
classroom. Right? So I like when YouTube channels have names such as yours. There's just, like I said, a little bit of mystery. You wonder why it's
hmm,
called that. It's almost like a brand name as opposed to the person's name. I don't know. That's just my personal bias towards it. But
yeah.
that's a
I
cool
totally
explanation.
agree.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes sense.
It's and I remember actually seeing your channel like a really long time ago, the Strength Classroom. I remember seeing that, and it stuck with me. I think if it was just a name, I probably wouldn't have
Yeah.
remembered.
No, no, I agree. I think that's the reason why I gravitate more towards a channel like that because you're right. It's like Nike, Adidas, whatever. You
Hmm.
remember it as opposed to the actual person.
Yeah.
Um, so you talk about the importance of functional strength and all that endless on your channel. Would you say people that do traditional methods, such as maybe let's say in the bodybuilding or powerlifting realm, would they be better off? Let's say they are not competitors in that realm, because then they can't do what I'm about to ask. But do you think they would be better off ditching traditional methods completely for sandbags, or maybe making it a more 50-50 or a little bit more biased towards sandbags? How do you think just the general population would benefit from being more biased towards sandbag training?
That's an awesome question. Yeah. I meant to say this earlier, but people often get the wrong impression when I say I like sandbags. They think I'm saying I don't like other things. But I think all training methods are cool. Like if you like machines, that's awesome. If you like barbells, that's awesome too. Uh, I think if you enjoy sandbags so much that you can't stop thinking about them, that they're just this thing that you can't wait to get home and pick up for some reason. I don't know why picking up a bag of sand is so fun, but I think it is. If it's something that just motivates you, and you find yourself watching videos all night, watching people's form, trying to find things to read about it, looking at old forums on stone lifting because it's kind of similar. If you find yourself so excited about it, I think it is a worthwhile trade. I think the problem many people face is they're just worried that if they do go completely all in on sandbags, they're going to be missing something. If commercial gyms have all this equipment, then it must be necessary for growing muscle, right? And
That's a great point. Yep.
it's hard to make that jump to doing sandbags only. But I think if you like it, I think you can get everything you want from them. You can hit all the basic movement patterns. You can do pretty much everything with the sandbag that you can with anything else. So I think the main reason to go all in is if you like it, if you find it really fun. I like to combine it with calisthenics. I think that makes for a perfect balance of like getting some easy pressing volume in while also hitting the legs and back really hard with the sandbag. And
Nice.
but of course you can press a sandbag too. So I would just say do whatever you find enjoyable, because if we're going to be training for the rest of our lives, and I assume anyone who's on your channel has probably accepted that, if you're going to do something for the rest of your life, why would you make yourself do something that you don't enjoy? Because I don't think any one thing is necessarily better than anything else. It's just, if it's fun, that's the thing you should do.
Is that it's also, if you're not enjoying it, you're probably not doing it the rest of your life.
Yeah,
You're
true.
going to move on to something else, right?
Yeah.
It's just like my training is kind of, I'll say I'm like in the 50-50 mode, just because I have a lot of, when I do the conjugate method, I have still some preconceived biases towards the squat, bench, and deadlift, but it's not so much in the sense to where I'm using those lifts basically to improve my performance in martial arts, more specifically jujitsu. So it's not like, oh, I'm going through hell. Everything is directed at putting 5 pounds on my squat, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
oh, this is my workout today. I work up to the heaviest squat possible, and then I have other exercises. Whereas before, it was like, okay, I'll squat, and then I'll do an exercise that can help this part of my squat, and this part of my squat, and then next thing you know is like everything is just in that one workout for the squat. That's it. Nothing to do with flexibility, nothing to do with like the upper back like you would when you're lifting up a sandbag onto you. It was just doing exercises that are solely going to bring up the squat, bench, and deadlift. Now, I still do movements like that, but just an example, even today, are you familiar with the conjugate method? No?
Yeah.
Like barbell. So today was my speed bench workout. And instead, normally I would just do like the 9 sets of 3, rest, whatever. But today it would be like 2 sets of speed bench. Then I would grab a moderate to heavy kettlebell, do some snatches, and then I would get a light sandbag and throw it over my shoulder. And then I would go back to the speed benching. So it's like I have a good balance of melding the two worlds without it being completely sandbag related. But even the other day when I went to go pick someone up at jujitsu, and he was like, how did you pick me up so fast? Like I
Yeah.
pretty much just started. It's been like a year and a half. But when you pick up a sandbag, because it is so compact, when you're lifting up a person, if you can get a good grip on them, they feel way lighter. Like a 220-pound person does not feel like my 250-pound sandbag. My
Yeah.
250-pound sandbag feels like it's a 500-pound person.
Yeah.
Just because of the compact nature. It's like it's a giant beanbag at the end of the day, right? So it is, I hate this word sometimes, but sandbags are very functional. They're the definition of functional. You got to pick
Yeah.
up your kids, you got to pick up groceries, whatever. Like it will strengthen your entire body from head to toe. But it'll take people a while before they get into it. But I can say from 2010, when I first started, to now, things like sandbags and kettlebell, like heavy stuff, and maces, those have become a lot more popular just in the past couple of years that I've seen compared to the past. Like if you showed someone that 10, 15 years ago, they'd say, what the hell is that? Like this person's wasting their time, like you said before, because it doesn't look like it's training one particular thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you made some awesome points there. Also, I just want to say sorry, my dogs keep barking.
No,
Hopefully
no,
that
it's okay.
barking-
You have dogs. What are you
they're
going to
they're
do?
mad at me for putting them in the room. So first thing about sandbags being functional, I like to think about what's the base level of an exercise. If you think of picking things up off the ground, like what is the most fundamental version of that? You could say it's probably not doing some kind of machine deadlift. A barbell deadlift's closer, but you could still get further. A
Yeah.
stone is pretty close. A sandbag. It's hard to get more of a fundamental lifting something from the ground than picking up a sandbag, if that makes sense.
Because the bottom kind of flattens out and
Yeah.
you're forced to like scoop yourself underneath it, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's about as pick up something from the ground as you can get, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And so it's
And still within like a real world context. I've seen
mhm,
people do like 7-inch deficit deadlifts,
yeah,
but that's outside the realm of like real world. So
yeah,
you're getting too far past. But you have a great point because that's pretty much about the furthest you're going to have to bend down to
hmm
pick up anyone. I don't know,
yeah.
like anyone, anything. It can't go below the ground, right? But that's true. It's about as functional as you're going to get.
It's if you have that at the bottom, then I feel like the sandbag deadlift will carry over to any deadlift above it, but any deadlift above it won't necessarily carry over to anything below. And so
Yeah.
it's the perfect way to build like a solid base, I think. It is admittedly a bit different. I'm sure you know picking up a sandbag doesn't really feel quite the same as doing a barbell deadlift. I Since I started picking up sandbags, I've actually found barbell deadlifts really uncomfortable. I think it's because the center of mass is out in front of you, whereas with a sandbag you can straddle it. So I've just become so used to having that advantage that it just feels strange to lift a barbell. But yeah, I'd say they're definitely functional if that's something that someone was
Yep.
after. The other thing you said that I liked is about how you're training for jujitsu. I feel like that's the main thing that someone should find. You asked if someone should switch over to sandbags completely or do a hybrid approach. I feel like the single greatest thing anyone can do is find something that guides their training. If For me, it's been the sandbag to shoulder. Everything I do is to improve the sandbag to shoulder. It's become like a sport for me. Lately, I've been on this side quest where I'm doing ultra high rep box squats and stuff, but everything is to improve the sandbag to shoulder. And when you have,
That was the first thing someone suggested. They saw me doing sandbag box squats and
Mhm.
they said, "Have you seen the Stone Circle do, I don't know what it was. It was like 150 pounds for like 100 reps or something like that."
Oh man, I just recently got 100 kilos for 100 reps, and I
In
hit
what period of
my
time?
my main what?
In what amount of time? Like how
Oh,
quickly
it
did you
took
do
me
it?
like 20 minutes. Yeah, it's a
Brutal.
pure mind over body.
For
I wouldn't
sure.
say I'm the strongest person, but I have the willpower to keep going. So it's you do that rep and then you're on the box, rest pausing, taking the deep breaths for like 6 seconds, then you do another
Yeah.
one and you just keep going. My main goal with that, and I actually just hit this too, was to take my 10 rep max without any rest pause and do 50, and that was 250 pounds. So I just recently hit 250 for 50 reps, and then it was less than a week later I did the 100 kilo or 220 for 100 reps, and I'm taking a little break now because I just did that and I just kept
Yeah,
going.
I'm gonna
But
try something like that. Maybe not that way, but just something with the 100 reps in a certain
mhm,
amount of time frame. And
yeah.
it
Yeah,
sounds like a good.
it's something else. It's just pure strength endurance, and I know a lot of guys on your channel could probably do that with a lot more weight if they were willing to rest and just keep going for that long. But I just
Yeah.
think finding that weight that is so challenging for you, but not so challenging that you can't do it, that perfect middle ground where you can just keep going forever,
Yes.
really, and you just train your mind. It's been about 4 months, I think, since I started, and the first time it was 150 pounds for 50 reps. The first time I did 250, I think I got 15 reps maybe with the rest pause. And it's just been slowly building up. It's become my favorite thing. Just sitting on that box, being 60 reps in, feeling this ultimate agony. It's almost a place where you start to feel most alive in that
Yeah.
suffering.
I,
It's
I
it's
have a
addicting.
similar story. Me and my friend used to do this in university, where we would have one of us squat and we would physically remove the J hooks.
Hmm.
So
Oh
you
man.
go until you can't anymore.
Yeah.
So you're dumping the bar essentially, not
Yeah.
and oh, this is uncomfortable, so I'm gonna stop. So we
Hmm.
didn't wouldn't do it super often, but it was just a way of like us pushing one another. And then I used to coach football, and we had a fundraiser for one of the families, and it was a squatting fundraiser. And there were all sorts of different events. You would do a 3 rep max, then you would take a certain percentage of your body weight, and whoever could, there was like a whole calculation of what would make you have the highest score. So I
Yeah.
put 275 on, and I told two of the players, I'm like, get rid of the hooks because like I need to go until like I
Yeah.
can't anymore. And I ended up doing 275. I think it was like for like 39 reps or something like that.
Wow.
I'm not exaggerating. Like what you just said, every time I went down, the reps coming up, it felt fast. But I, when you see stars, the
Yeah.
stars were like this close at a certain point.
Yeah.
Like when I was done, I couldn't see or hear properly for about 5 or 10 minutes.
Oh man, yeah.
Now, I'm not saying someone has to go to that every single time, but it's nice to know that when push comes to shove, you can push yourself to that point because you
Yeah.
know you've done it before,
Yeah.
right? So it does give you this mental edge in any other physical endeavor you would need to dig that deep into.
Yeah, I think that strength endurance is just the coolest attribute of all of them. It's
Yeah.
maybe it's because I've always been a little better at it than I am at max strength and stuff, but man, the idea of having 275 on your back for 39 reps, just holding the weight, that's intense. The
Yeah, that was the worst part. My shoulders actually went numb at a certain point.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the trick with the box squat, and the reason you can, or the sandbag box squat, and why you can push it so far is that the bottom is kind of like a complete rest.
Yes.
I found that if the sandbag is too narrow, it is kind of a fight to try to keep it from falling between your legs. But besides that, you just hold that thing, deep breath, stretch your leg out because it's starting to cramp too bad, stretch your arms out. It's really fun. And there are all these little things you can do. Like I'll start with chalk and use a fingers interlocked grip because that's more of a
Okay.
passive grip, so I can save my strength for later. But every time at about 20 reps in, the chalk will go away, so I'll have to switch to an S grip. And then if
Okay.
I switch that every 5 reps, then I'll keep my strength or I'll keep the
Okay.
fatigue balance between everything. And
Because then you're not locked into one position the whole time,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
I
see, that's
tried
what
that and it
that's what
hurt.
happens with the squat. Because I was
Yeah.
just there's nothing you could do on a squat like that, so I was
Mhm.
like this the whole time. So I was just starting to cramp up at a certain point.
Yeah.
But that's my next. That was going to be my next question. What is your preferred grip to grab a set? Let's say you're doing like a weighted carry or something. Would it be the S grip? Would it be the just clasping it like this?
It depends on the sandbag. Uh,
Okay,
I like the Iron Mine sandbags because they're not quite as wide. They're also really sturdy.
that's the blue brand, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
I like them. They're not quite as wide, and I feel like I don't have like really short arms or anything, but they're not super long either. And I
okay,
found with the Iron Mind, I mostly like it because I find it easier to throw it onto my shoulder because I'm still kind of a small guy. But with that one, I can reach all the way around and get the fingers interlocked grip. And if I'm doing a set of box squats for a while, eventually that indent starts to show up, and then I can switch to the S grip. But I have
yes,
trouble getting to anything other than fingers interlocked
okay,
for most sandbags. With the Cerberus sandbags, I can kind of wedge my arms into it for a while and get a fingers interlocked grip. Those ones are a bit wider. Same with the Rogue. So I'd say most of the time I do the fingers interlocked, or I'll
okay.
just grab onto the side, which takes a lot more bicep strength or brachialis or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's still pretty strong. And with the box squats, I'll like to switch. But with the carries, I usually do the interlocked grip, I'd say.
Okay. Um, so if you were to get a complete beginner, they are interested, let's say maybe you're training them online, not person to person, and they are interested in sandbag training, what would be the one exercise that you could prescribe to them that you think they would have no problem doing on their own and it would give them like the most bang for their buck early on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with someone who's completely new, the first thing I would tell them to do is try to learn the Valsalva maneuver, and that can be
Okay.
kind of difficult at first. I would tell them to lay on the ground on their back and get like a book or something and put it on their stomach and try to get them to learn what it's like to take that deep breath into their stomach and feel that book rise on its own, rather like the stomach expands on its own rather than pushing out, and then bracing with that and just getting used to doing that for a while. That'd probably be the first thing. But
Okay.
if they can get that down, I would definitely say the bear hug carry. That seems to be that's my favorite exercise of all time. I think it's the greatest exercise of all time. It just fixes everything. If you have any weak points at anywhere in your body, it brings them to the front instantly. And every time you pick up that sandbag, that weak point is going to be pushed to its limit until it is no longer a weak point and the next thing shows up. For most people, it's going to be it's kind of difficult to lift with that semi-false grip at first because you kind of have to wedge your hands underneath.
Yeah.
So that takes some time at first. It's the wrists, and then after that, it seems to be the forearms or the biceps. After that, it's just core strength and being able to breathe. After that, it's the upper back. Somehow, it seems like it shouldn't be, but somehow the upper back is a weak point, and then
Yep.
it fixes everything. So I would say learn the Valsalva maneuver, and then just carry a sandbag. Just do the bear hug carry. Maybe just add that to your other training if you're already doing something else. Just at the end of your workout, do 1 or 2 sets of moderately difficult bear hug carries. You don't have to go till you're face first on the ground, but getting at least somewhat close. When I started doing that, I noticed instant changes in the way I felt. I had a slightly internally rotated shoulder posture. That went away. My forward head posture
That makes
kind of
sense.
went back. The positioning of my torso changed. It made me feel, the only way I can describe it is if you picture a state champion wrestler on the wrestling mat, just the way they stand there, the way they hold themselves, and the way they move,
Yeah.
something about that just gives you the impression that no matter what you did, you could never unbalance them. Just they are so confident in their positioning in space, and I feel like that's what the bear hug carry does to you. Not
Okay.
on that level, of course, but that's what it did for me. It just completely changed the way I felt, and I feel like it's the perfect base builder for anything else. So if you were doing calisthenics, if you add some bear hug carries, I feel like it's going to make you progress faster in your calisthenics. It's that old saying, squats build the arms. People don't like to talk about that anymore,
Yeah.
but I think it's true. If you do something that hits so much muscle at once, causes such a crazy stimulus, and sends that signal that you need to grow, it's like everything else, just is supercharged. And I think that's what the bear hug carry does.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I haven't heard someone make that reference in a
It's gone
really long
away.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I've seen it in comment sections like occasionally, and it's always someone saying, "No, you're stupid for saying that. Why would doing a squat build the biceps?" Well, of course you also have to curl, but doing the squats speeds up the progress you get from the curls. At least that's
Yeah.
that's how it's been. That's what I've experienced, it seems
No,
like.
no,
So,
that makes sense. I can't remember. It was on this forum that doesn't exist anymore, but someone did this routine where they deadlifted 3 times a week, and
hmm
it was almost like what's that for the small of for
hmm
squats. But it was in that where it was like one was medium, one was high, one was low, and I think he said he did it for about 6 months,
hmm
and he did no curls whatsoever, and his arms increased by like 3/4 of an inch or something
Oh
like
wow,
that.
yeah.
But
Makes sense. Just if you get
yeah,
overall bigger, then it just
exactly.
everything has to adapt.
It just has to.
Yeah.
It's the principle of growth. There's nothing to, and I would say that with sandbags, that would even hold more true because when you're holding it in front, your biceps can easily become the limiting factor at a certain point.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that Sandbags built my biceps a bunch.
Yep,
I noticed
100%.
it sounds strange, but after a couple months doing the bear hug carries, that was the main thing I did. I noticed an actual increase in the thickness of the bicep tendon and my arms. I was always really bad at isolating my arms because I just didn't like it. And I started doing the carries and they got bigger pretty quick. So I think it's a great way to do it.
Yeah, that's something I used to, not, I shouldn't say I used to as if I don't do it anymore, but for a period of time, I would end off one of my upper body workouts with, do like bicep curls with a band and then
hmm
tricep pushdowns with the band. And
Yeah.
then I would superset that with the weighted bear hug carries, like you just said. And it would like light up my back, obviously, but I remember my bicep, the area, the brachialis and the arms would just be completely lit up. And then as bonus, it gets your core, it gets all the other muscles in. But
Yeah.
I I like to do those carries on specifically like an upper body day just because I feel like I don't really pigeonhole myself, but I like doing that supersetting with some upper body stuff
hmm
because it just feels natural. I feel like that's
Yeah.
what I feel it the most. It's almost like a pre-fatigue thing.
Yeah.
But you have a program called Sandbag Hypertrophy 2.0, I noticed.
Yeah.
So it's which is really interesting because before I looked at your channel, I thought it was just all about sandbags.
Yeah.
And so what inspired this approach? I feel like you kind of answered it at the beginning, but if you could just explain a little more.
Yeah. Well, mainly sandbag hypertrophy came about because I experienced that crazy. I was plateaued for so long, and suddenly I wasn't, and I was like, hey, wait a second, sandbags and calisthenics actually works very well for building muscle and getting you out of that early intermediate plateau. That's where I was at, I think, and it worked so well. I didn't see any other programs that out there that were just sandbags and calisthenics that were focused on building muscle as the main goal. There's a lot of stuff about using sandbags alongside other things and as a strength training tool, but I don't think that many people were talking about sandbags as a tool for building muscle. So I wanted to put something together that did that. And the heart of sandbag hypertrophy is the sandbag to shoulder. It's We kind of talked about this earlier with the Brazilian jiu-jitsu you do, how having something that guides you, it almost makes everything else you do feel more significant. Um, like if say you don't like doing curls, but now you're doing curls. Originally you do curls to build your biceps, you don't really like that very much. Then you become a martial artist, and now you're doing curls to build your biceps to make you a better martial artist. I feel like having that extra layer of purpose makes things a lot it makes things a lot easier, and you enjoy your training a lot more. And
Because
so
you're not just doing it to do it at that point.
yeah, it's muscle. This is just my opinion, but I feel like muscle as the primary objective doesn't work as well as if muscle is the secondary objective. I think many people would build a lot more muscle if they trained for something that wasn't muscle focused. And I know I just said sandbag hypertrophy was about building muscle, but the point of the program was getting better at the sandbag to shoulder. That's the thing, and everything else around it is meant to build you up to help improve that. And by doing that, you end up with a lot more muscle. And it's sandbag to shoulder is the first exercise, and then after that, it rotates between a few different things like rows or carries. The final exercise of the day is always a AMRAP set of something like the basic lift from the lap or the box squat, something like that. And then at the end, there's some active recovery for the posterior chain and abs. And then on the other days, it's calisthenic circuits. I don't know if you want to talk about those at all, but that's kind of the other aspect to the training style.
No, I
Is
think that's enough for people to understand what it entails. And is this
yeah.
something you sell?
I have a book, Sandbag Hypertrophy. I wrote like an entire actual book, and then it has like a couple programs at the end. That's on Amazon.
Okay.
But I did put the program out for free in a video if anyone wants to watch it. But
Okay.
yeah,
Send me that link after, and we'll plug it in the video of
okay,
this here.
cool.
Um, so if someone is in the midst of, let's say, sandbag training, right?
Hmm.
And let's say they are away for a week and they can't have access to sandbags. What would you? But they still want to go through like the movement patterns that would be similar to, let's say, the exercises that are in your routine.
Hmm.
What would you say that is at a, let's just call them conventional gyms,
Hmm.
that can just help bridge that gap for about a week or so?
Yeah. Well, if it's just a week, my first option or the first thing I would say is probably just take a deload, because I think a lot of people could use it when they're lifting heavy sandbags so often. It's a lot of spinal loading. And so I think if you can at least take a deload from heavy movements that load the spine, that might be a good idea. If you're going to go that route, I would say something like you focus on the small muscles, do a lot of bicep curls, maybe just try to bring up your legs with something easy. But if you're going for specificity, maybe if it's a bit longer and you don't want to take that break, my favorite exercise that I feel like has great carryover to lifting sandbags and stones and everything is an axle Zercher squat from pins at parallel. You don't have to use the axle. I just think it feels better on the elbows. But that would be my favorite exercise. If you wanted to do something heavy, it would be axle Zercher squat to pins at parallel. And if you can do some extra band tension, it feels so good. Something about heavy band tension from that dead stop. It kind of mimics lifting a sandbag in a way, because it's a lot like the lift from the lap. But also, I just really like that exercise, and I feel like it works a lot of the same muscles. So
It's funny. I was just like, not that I was ignoring you, but I was just staring off in the distance because I almost have to prevent myself from doing that exercise too often.
yeah,
That searcher off pins is one of my favorite exercises.
it's so fun. Yeah.
I did it. Someone showed me, I think it's almost like around 2010, 2011, someone said they used to do that to build up their deadlift strength without actually
Hmm.
deadlifting.
Yeah.
And then I just really liked the exercise a lot. And
Hmm.
I just stopped doing it for X amount of years. And then I came back to it. I want to say it's within the last year and a half, maybe 2 years. But I was just thinking to myself, like, oh, I do that exercise. I've done it so much lately. I don't know if I've ever attached bands to it.
Oh yeah. It's. I don't know exactly. I have the West Side barbell bands from like
Okay.
six
Like the
years
short
ago.
one?
What's that?
The short ones are like 20 inches or something like
The
that.
long ones that are
Okay,
meant for like squats and stuff.
yeah,
And my favorite, because I'm not super strong, I was usually around the 300-pound mark when I was doing it, was adding
yeah.
the purple bands. It was like the perfect
Okay.
amount of tension that it just felt, I don't know, it just felt right for some reason. I really enjoy it. That's the one thing I miss since I switched over completely to sandbags is
Okay.
the Zercher pin squat with the bands. Just it feels cool.
Yeah, one exercise that I will say from my personal experience, and I just did it last week. I for the first ish time I want to say, what that felt like getting at least the top half of the movement was just doing a Zercher good morning, not something straight all the
Hmm.
way to the floor, but
Yeah.
I did them in the fashion where it was like as I came up, I kind of like lifted my arms up, almost like
Hmm.
if I could imagine the sandbag was there and I was trying to throw it on my shoulder. I
Yeah.
felt as I was doing them, just the ability that I was, because the barbell is in front of you on a Zercher, it felt like I was able to get my hips through as
Hmm.
you would on like a sandbag to shoulder type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would agree. Probably the Zercher off pins. That's probably the closest you'll get to a sandbag without actually having a sandbag. But one thing I don't want to say I disagree with you because it's personal
Hmm.
preference, but I've hated doing Zercher stuff with an axle bar. I don't know
Oh,
what it
really?
is. I feel
Yeah.
like it pries my elbow open more. I don't know what
Yeah.
it is. In theory, I used to put on like fat grips or use a fat bar, and in theory, it sounds like that should be better on your like how it feels on your elbow joint. But I always felt it made it worse. But I think I'm in the minority there because everyone says what you just said, and just for me, it's the completely opposite experience. I don't know what it is.
Well, I've seen your videos, and your arms aren't small. It's possible that because you have so much mass on your arms, the Zercher or
Could
the
be.
axle is too much, and so you have more just more mass there. My arms
It could
still
be.
aren't
Yeah. So
that
it's
big,
the
so
body
it's
structure too. Then
yeah, and maybe it's the combat sports have just given you some extra padding around the elbows and all the
maybe,
just places you don't normally get. I don't know.
of course.
I was gonna also say if you're brand new to lifting sandbags, another awesome exercise you can do is neutral grip pull-ups using a at least semi-false grip or a full false
Yeah.
grip if you can, because that really trains the wrists to get used to lifting the sandbag off the ground. And so that'd be another one I would do. Just doing top half range of motion, or doing 1.5 reps, like where you pull all the way to the top, go down halfway, top again, then all the way down. Stuff like that. It seems to work the forearms in exactly the way you need it for sandbags. So that'd be another one.
Okay. I saw this one time and it was when I first started jujitsu. It was like exercises that aren't too fancy, but just like enough to like mimic something in jujitsu. And what someone did is they put like a slam ball on top of a multi-grip pull-up bar.
Hmm.
And you were able to lock your hands around the slam ball and pull
Yeah.
like that. Do you think that would have any application to sandbag?
I think, yeah, that sounds like an awesome idea.
Yeah.
I think that'd be even more specific than just using the bars because you have to also account for the fact that the ball is probably going to move on you like a
Yeah.
sandbag would, and you just have to wrap your hands around it in a similar way, I would think. Yeah, I'll have to try
Yeah.
that one. That sounds cool.
Yeah, no, I saw that. It's nice, and because your hands aren't necessarily like squeeze gripping like that, I did find like for someone that might have elbow issues or some form of tendonitis, I feel like you're able to really pull with your muscles, and it gave your joints a bit of a rest, let's say.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
People, I saw this video yesterday where this guy was talking about how he's like 22 and he bench presses X amount of weight and he doesn't have any shoulder issues because of this exercise. And he shows the exercise, but it's also like, you're 22.
Yeah.
I would hope you don't have shoulder. In
Yeah.
fact, if you had shoulder things, it's most likely you did something wrong or something catastrophic happened to you. It's
Yeah.
not because of your fancy exercise. If you were 50, then we're talking a totally different story here. But this guy's acting like, no, it's his exercise. It's like, okay, sure, buddy.
Yeah.
Um, I wrote this question down. I feel like you'll answer it in 2 seconds, but
Okay.
you're obviously, I'm sure, very thrilled that things such as like sandbags, kettlebells, mace bells, they're becoming pretty popular amongst certain pages, channels, populations.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Do I think that's
you're,
cool?
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh yeah. No, I think that's awesome. I think it shows that there is a trend towards people maybe being a bit more open-minded because like we talked about earlier, uh, there was that opinion for so long, or just the thought that if you don't specifically isolate a muscle, then it's not going to grow. And I think that's sort of going away. You almost see it in I try not to watch too much of it, but uh, recently in some of the science-based videos, it's almost like a lot of them are starting to say the opposite of what they were saying before, and it's like, yeah, do the heavy compounds, don't worry about going too slow on the negatives, and contraction-based exercise is good, and it seems like there's a shift happening, and I think that sandbags and kettlebells and just even mace bells and all that stuff, I think it's going to become even more popular as time goes by, and as people realize that building muscle as a side effect is equally as valid as just being a bodybuilder. Because being a bodybuilder who's massive and can do cool things is way more fun than just building muscle and not being mobile or whatever. And I think a lot of people are becoming aware that that's an option
Yeah.
because I don't think many people even knew that was something that you could do. It was always either you're functional or you're big. And there are these specific training tools that I think work very well in that middle ground place, like a sandbag. It builds a lot of muscle, but it also makes you really good at moving quickly with heavy weights. It makes you have to improve your mobility if you want to lift a sandbag from the ground correctly. You have to learn to breathe and all of these things. And the kettlebells are really awesome for making you just extremely mobile. I don't have much experience with them, but what I've seen, it seems awesome. I'd like to get one myself
Yeah.
soon, and that
Well,
that seems to
what I
be in a
like about
similar.
kettlebells, and I think you would like this aspect of them too, is when they're light, you don't notice much of a difference. But once they get, I'll say, to about 70 pounds, that's when, regardless of what the weight is, they just start getting more and more thick. And they're like, I have a 100, my heaviest one is an 80 kilogram kettlebell.
Wow,
And
that's big.
the handle is so thick, like
Yeah,
unnaturally thick. And then even once you get to like 48 kilos, somewhere around there, it's like using a fat grip, the
yeah,
dumbbell essentially. And that's one thing I like about kettlebells, but I think you'd like kettlebells a lot.
yeah. You just have to have strong hands to use them.
Yes,
Yeah, that's
yes, for
cool.
sure.
The idea of thick handled training or whatever. Ever since I read that book way back, the dinosaur training, it's something about it is just exciting. Like it taps into this place that just makes me want to go pick up heavy
Yeah.
things for some reason.
But even and there's like even people that are non like strength training people and whatever, just they're just like health people in general. I've seen countless of videos of them coming up and telling people that grip strength is actually an indicator of youth and vitality. So as your grip strength get older, it means you're kind of aging too fast, essentially.
Yeah,
And but grip is super important in everything. Like even specifically martial arts, like and especially in something like jujitsu or any type of grappling, where you're gonna want to grab someone and they're gonna want you not to grab them. So their first
yeah,
instinct is to it's called breaking your grip. And sometimes I'll notice where it's like, "Ooh, I got a nice solid grip on this guy," and it's from doing things like kettlebells and just thick bar training and stuff like that. Have you
yeah.
ever heard of something called a gripito before?
I don't think so. It sounds familiar for some reason, but I'm not sure.
It looks like a torpedo. I guess that's where they get the name from. And have you ever seen that or done that exercise where you maybe loop a band around the end of a barbell and you kind of go like this and the
Oh
weight
yeah.
comes up? Yeah, so it's basically something specifically for that. You could
Okay.
even put it in a bucket of sand and twist.
Oh yeah.
Um, but what's cool about that is like you can hook, I attach a kettlebell and you go like that. And I've noticed that really strengthens your grip up a lot. I think I don't know if they were Ukrainian or they were Russian powerlifters or sorry, strongmen that were doing that exercise quite a bit. And that's definitely a great one for grip.
Yeah.
But you talked about the Sandbag Hypertrophy 2.0. That's your latest program, if I am
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. It was the original one was it was Sandbag Hypertrophy, the sandbag only program. So it was
Okay.
very minimalist. It was
Also,
basically
calisthenics are another layer that you added
yeah.
on.
Well, it was you do it like a basic sandbag exercise, and then you just progress a horizontal and vertical pressing push up basically. So you'd try to
Okay.
take your you don't need weight or anything. You would just take your push ups from a standard push up to pseudo planche push ups eventually, and just keep going that way. And then you start with pike push ups, eventually go to handstand push ups. So it was just very minimalist for anyone who didn't have access to anything. And then sandbag hypertrophy 2.0, the newest one, it's more of a it's less minimalist. You have to have access to a pull-up bar and if you can some rings for some inverted rows and stuff like that. But
Okay. That
yeah.
sounds interesting. Do you have anything like a sneak peek you can give viewers that if you have any projects that are upcoming, something they
Oh
can look out for?
yeah, actually I these last 2 weeks I kind of just became a hermit for a while. Besides when I had to go out for work stuff, and I'm actually just about done writing the whole second book. So it's gonna be it's gonna be focused on strength endurance, and it's gonna be about those high rep box squats. And
Okay.
I don't know if anyone will want to run the program because it's really hard, but it's a lot of just motivational stuff to make you excited about strength endurance because I think it's cool. I feel like strength endurance is like a condensed journey, especially when you start doing those 100 rep sets. It's like you get a certain amount of the way through and you go through all these different steps of wanting to quit and what happens in your mind and all that stuff. So that's what I've been working on recently. Besides that, just working on regular videos and everything. But that's something I'm trying to get done. But it's hard to get to that place where you've written. It looks like a lot of books from your website. So it's hard to get to that place where you're sure that you're at the finish line. Like, should I change this one phrase or those little things? That's sort of
Yeah.
where I'm at. So
Yeah, it's like sometimes I feel not I don't I'm almost guilty before I like put something on my website because I'm like I don't know if this is doing someone like a buyer justice
mhm.
because I'm always like, oh, maybe I could put this, maybe I could put that, but then I'll never end up publishing anything if
Yeah,
that's the case. Because,
yeah,
but then and then some, and then four, five, six, 10 people start buying it, and you're like, oh, okay, they're happy with it. So
yeah,
you get into almost like a writer's block where it's like, maybe I should add this chapter, maybe this chapter's a little bit too long-winded, or something
yeah.
like that.
That's
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's this newest one I'm working on. I've been trying to do more actual stories, just like made up stories or things from my past that are embellished, obviously, because a good story always is. And just trying to. The hardest part for me is having continuity through the whole thing. And I find writing so enjoyable, and there are those days when I'm sitting there and I am thinking this does not go together, and I do not know how to get it to go together, but I'll just keep trying for the entire day and nothing will work. I'll come back the next day and then out of nowhere there it is. And now this section makes sense with this section. Everything's going together. I find writing so enjoyable. Even if it is kind of a stressful process trying to get that finished product where everything just flows and uh, you're not saying things you shouldn't say too early because it doesn't make sense because you haven't said this other thing yet. And yeah, I find it so enjoyable. But that's what I've been working on lately. I'm at that stage. So
Nice. So almost done, essentially.
yeah, yeah, I
Done the bulk of it.
yeah, I might add a few extra things, but that's what it's been. It's recently, yeah.
All right. How would beginners go about choosing their the first sandbag weight they're using? How
Uh,
would they go?
I usually base it off of deadlift strength. If someone doesn't know what their barbell deadlift is, and they haven't done any lifting, I usually say start with 75 pounds. If you can deadlift 225, then like 100 pounds is a good starting range. If you can do 405 or more, 150 pounds. And besides that, I think that's a pretty good starting point. Like you said, 150 will probably still be heavy, even if you can deadlift 4 plates, but I think that's within reason. But I always have to say that you will adapt really fast. So if you start with a 100 pound, if you can deadlift 225 and you start with a 100 pound sandbag, within 2 months you will probably need another sandbag. And so I always recommend, if you can, get some kind of adjustable sandbag from the start, or make your own first sandbag so you don't waste the money, because you can easily make a 100 pound sandbag out of a thrift store canvas bag or something like that. And but yeah, that's usually what I recommend.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a, like I've never really gone about finding the ideal weight for myself. I have like a 100-pound slam ball, and then I have a 150-pound sandbag, and then I have a 200 and like let's say 10-pound sandbag,
Hmm.
and then I have a 250-pound sandbag.
Yeah,
And I deadlift like maybe mid 500s.
yeah,
So and I find like the 250 is like a nice weight where I could do it for 1 rep each side to the shoulder, and
yeah,
it's like I'm done.
yeah,
Like that's let's rest a couple of minutes before going to the next set.
yeah. It's hard. 250 is a heavy weight, and that's
It's so like I remember the first time I did it, I kind of lapped it, and I was sitting there for like longer than normal because I was like, oh, this one's gonna feel different when I get to the top. Because
yeah,
and that's one thing I've talked about. I'm not saying power cleans are bad in any sense, but I find if you can throw the thing onto your shoulder and actually like catch it onto your shoulder, not like kind of like like wrestle it up onto your shoulder, where you
yeah,
can actually fling it in the air and it gets a little bit of distance. When it hits you, it's it's I would say it's more sport specific than a power clean, just
hmm,
because you think of a power clean like I understand they talk about like absorbing force, but it's like a clean line, perfectly balanced on both sides.
hmm,
Whereas the sandbag, it's onto your shoulder
yeah,
and it's all hitting you in an awkward way, which is typically what would happen in a sport like football or lacrosse or just any type of contact sport like that. So I would say they're really like sport specific. Like for football, any type of wrestling, lacrosse, like I just said, anything where someone is going to be hitting you or
yeah,
you are going to be hitting them, if you're not training with sandbags, like with your own personal choice. If you don't have access to them, nothing you could do about it. But if you're
yeah.
just ignoring them, I feel like that type of athlete, it's really doing themselves a disservice.
Yeah, it's I the way I shoulder a sandbag is completely technique based, because I think I said this before. I've never been the strongest guy, but I can kind of figure out the cheats so that I could do heavier weights. And so I start with the sandbag, or when it's on the ground, I have to lift it from a standing position. I'm with the 250. I'm not strong enough to straddle it and reach my arms around it. I have to have it standing upright, and then I bear hug it and I lift it up like that.
Ooh,
That's the
okay. I've
only
never
way
really
I've
tried that.
because it gives you a leverage advantage. It's really difficult on the bear hug squeezing strength at first, but once that builds up, and I found it adapts really fast. Like it gives you a huge advantage. So I'll lift it like that, and then I'll flip it onto my lap sideways. It's a lot more work to maneuver it into that position, but I just don't have the strength to lift it from the laying flat horizontal position. So once it's on my lap, I'll put my arms over top, and then hips back, and then triple extension, throw the thing up, and then I'll reach my arm underneath and catch it like
Oh, I've
this.
seen that style
And
before.
so
Yeah.
I first got it from Andy Crawford. I don't know if you've seen him, but he's
I don't know. I don't recall.
oh man, he's a Scottish stone lifter who, I think it was like a 400 pounds sandbag he shouldered. He weighs like 220, I think. It was insane.
Holy shit.
Yeah, yeah, he's not the biggest guy. But you throw it up, catch it like that. So one arm on under, one arm over. That has to be exactly what you were talking about, like absorbing that force. You throw it with everything you have, and then you catch it, and you have to absorb that weight. It feels a lot like what I imagine being hit by someone with a in a football game would feel like.
Yeah. So you pick it up just so I can imagine this. So you pick it up and it will be straight up and down like this.
Yeah, if you shift it so it's on one edge, so it's leaning slightly at an angle in
Like
front of
Leaning
you,
Tower of Pisa type of thing. Like,
yeah, that makes it a little easier because then you can kind of wedge your chest up against it. And I'll just squeeze my arms around it, and then just try to arch my back a bit, and then just like drive it up. And if it's really heavy, it's hard to describe, but if it's light enough, you can wrap your arms around it and lift it all the way straight up onto your lap in a standing position. But what makes the technique extra effective if you don't have that strength off the ground is you can wrap your arms around it and then pick it up. And once you get to it's about halfway up over your thighs, you can just shift it sideways and almost leverage it onto your lap. And it lets you lift sandbags that you otherwise couldn't. And for me, I've always had a weakness off the ground compared to everything else for some reason. I've been trying to bring it up, but so what was holding me back was just picking the thing up. But once I got it to my lap, I could throw it up there. So it's kind of like a cheat to lift heavier weights, I think. And there's these guys. I just saw this recently. They lift these giant gra- what are they? They're giant bags of grain, and they're huge.
okay.
They're really massive, and it looks really cool because you can basically it's so tall you can just wrap a strap around it and then just flip it onto your leg from the start. And I really want to try that. I feel like that'd be fun.
So you would say that style of picking it up off the floor, that's actually like a regression to just kind of picking it up. Because what I do, I just would essentially have it lying flat on the floor.
Hmm.
Like you said, you would have it like vertical, like leaning. Mine would just be
Yeah.
completely flat on the floor.
Hmm.
And then I would kind of like wiggle it from side to side so I could get my hands under.
Hmm.
And then I'll kind of like do almost like let's say a power row where I'll lift it up just to get off the floor and then row it into my chest
Yeah.
and then get my knees underneath. The method you just described is like more energy efficient than what I currently do.
It's I think it depends on your strength. If you're
Okay.
really strong from that position off the floor, maybe if you're a good deadlifter, I think that you can. It will probably save you some energy to just lift it from that lying on the ground position, just
Okay.
because you won't have to do as much work once it's on your lap. But
Gotcha.
uh, also, if you're going to start with the sandbag standing vertically on your lap when you're trying to shoulder it, then I would say that maybe starting with it standing would save some energy because it's just pick it up straight up and then you're there and you're just it just depends on how you do it because I used to lift with the sandbag standing upright on my lap so it was vertical like this if that makes
Okay.
sense and then bear hug it and try to throw it up to my shoulder and that worked for me up until I got to about 20-30 pounds above body weight. But once I got there, I was having a lot of trouble with it. And that's when I switched to the horizontal method on the lap. And then I found all the tricks. Because if it's horizontal, at some point it has to rotate to a vertical position to get on your
Yes.
shoulder. And so you can almost make use of that rotation as a way to bypass some of the strength you would need. If it's standing
Okay.
upright on your lap, it's pure strength. You have to kind of move it to the side a little bit, but you either have the strength to do it or you don't. You throw it up and you just keep going. But with it horizontally, you can throw it up and then make use of that rotation. It's part way up, and then if it's diagonal like this on your chest, then you can almost kind of shift it onto your shoulder rather than having to go directly up, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
it's like a cheat code, I think, and that's how I've been able to shoulder heavier sandbags just by figuring out the technique. And like you mentioned with the power clean, that's exactly how I view the sandbag to shoulder as an Olympic lift. I know a lot of guys don't like hearing that. They want it to be this rugged, unpredictable thing, but I like knowing how it's going to go. I like packing the sand down tightly, getting it on my lap, and then perfecting that movement until I can do it exactly right every time. And that's my favorite way to shoulder sandbags. There is
Well,
something.
at the end of the day, like let's be honest, when someone deadlifts, they're not just ripping it off the floor. Maybe it
Yeah,
looks like they're ripping it off the floor, but there's technique. If you want to lift heavy weights, no matter what the modality is, there's technique involved.
true.
There's
Yeah,
very few people that can just pick up a heavy weight via muscling it up. And
yeah.
if they can, their ceiling is going to be a lot lower because they
Hmm.
can't repeat that technique. The more you can repeat technique from your first warm up set to whatever your work sets are going to be, then that's going to allow you to get stronger in the long run because you're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So, like you just said, you actually want, even though sandbags appear to be this unpredictable, chaotic exercise, which let's be honest, they are
Yeah.
compared to most, but you want to make it predictable in that your body is going through the exact same motions every single time.
Yeah.
Because it's like when you, let's say you go to a powerlifting meet, you have your third attempt, you've never attempted this weight before, you unrack it, and already you're thinking, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit.
Yeah.
And your cues get all thrown off. So it's why you would want yourself to be have your form honed in. So that's
Yeah.
it's actually pretty impressive that that's your approach to sandbags, because I think most people would just assume you just muscle it up, no
Yeah.
matter what the weight is. But you can't really expect yourself to get better, because at the end of the day, loading a heavy sandbag is a skill all in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, it's the thing that drives my training. It's kind of what gives me purpose. And to say this is the thing I care about above all other things, why would I not try to get better at it? And that's not to say I also train with sandbags that are underfilled. They have some extra space, and so maneuvering them is really difficult. And I feel like that's great for as an accessory exercise, but as the main thing, I'm packing that sand down as tight as I can get it, and I'm doing the exact same thing every time if I can. And if it goes wrong, then there is something to be gained from trying to get out of that position where you don't want it to be. But yeah, I think of it as an Olympic lift for sure.
Yeah, no, it is at the end of the day. So are there any exercises that you would say that barbells and dumbbells have the advantage over sandbags, if any? You could say no.
Yeah, I'd say so. Barbells and dumbbells make it a lot easier to isolate your arms. That's definitely the thing. I've been working more with isolation stuff with like bands lately for my
Okay.
arms. I think you mentioned that earlier too, and it has sped up the process a bit. The sandbags will build your arms, but I feel like it's easier to do it with a barbell or a dumbbell. I do also feel like um, anytime I would do sandbags only for a while, this was a couple years ago, and then go back to squatting a barbell, I would always get way more sore in my legs. And so I feel like barbells are probably a lot more efficient for if you're trying to like just hit your legs with a squat or something like that, because you don't have to worry about holding on to the thing also. It's sandbags, they're the greatest thing about them is also the most difficult thing about them, that you always have to hold on to the thing. It's always your full body, and so you can't really isolate things. You kind of can. If you're using really light sandbags, you could probably curl it or something. But I
Yeah.
think if you're trying to bring up weak points, I would say the barbell and dumbbell are probably a more efficient option. Not to say you can't do it with a sandbag. If I was Yeah, I would say that they have an upper hand on in some things, but it just depends what you're trying to do. If you're trying to build a maximal program centered around sandbags, I'd probably say don't just lift the sandbag. Do something else too. Like I like calisthenics because that fills in those gaps, but sandbags and then maybe doing your pressing with a barbell. You can press a sandbag, but it's also I don't know, it's almost unnecessarily difficult to get that thing into position, lay on your back, and if it falls, it's going to fall on your face. Whereas with the barbell, you could just do the bench press or whatever. I think it just depends if you what you like really, but yeah.
Yeah, I've done things such as pressing with a sandbag or whatever. I do like these workouts that I haven't really filmed, and people have asked about them, where they're like, it's not super sports specific, but it's like I have these bands that like wrestlers use, and I throw around sand, like I'll like literally roll around with my sandbag as if it's
Yeah.
a person
Yeah.
type of thing. But I have like pressed sandbags off me, like behind my head, almost like what I would do with a person. But
Hmm.
you're right; it becomes like unnecessarily hard if you're like trying to turn that into a push exercise. There's
Yeah.
much better, even if you were just doing a floor press with a barbell or
Yeah.
dumbbells, would probably be much more efficient use of
It's
your
just
time.
yeah, it's just it's a if you think that pressing a sandbag is really cool, I'd say pressing a sandbag overhead specifically is a goal as worthy as throwing it to your shoulder is, and I could see someone being so obsessed with that becomes the thing that pushes them forward, and at that point, just press the sandbag. But I think there are some exercises that are just easier. Sandbags do hit most of the body, but they definitely specialize in I'd say the arms, the back, and the core. and the glutes and hamstrings. But if you really want to, there are other things you can do that are definitely more efficient. It just depends what you want to do. You don't If you like sandbags, you could just stick to them completely. But if you're going for a maximum program, like there's no reason to uh, put yourself at a disadvantage just for the sake of being like a sandbag purist or something like that. There are definitely benefits to other things, I would say.
Okay. Just a couple more questions. In your experience, are your calisthenic exercises that you pair with sandbag training, are they purely body weight, or do you add weight at any point to them?
I've just been doing body weight. My
Okay.
my whole point with the calisthenics, I do them in circuit fashion. That's like a whole thing if you wanted to get into it. But I like to use them as a way to make sure I'm building muscle everywhere, make sure I'm balanced. I get all my pressing work done with calisthenics, but I also want it to be as efficient as possible for building those things so I have more resources left over for the sandbags. And I've just found just doing high rep body weight stuff is just it's so easy. There's no mental preparation for it. You don't have to load up the weights or anything. It's like, okay, it's time to train. I'll do some band curls, some band pull aparts. I'm good to go. And I'll stretch out my wrists or whatever. And it's it's refreshing on the mind. You don't have to work yourself up for the workout, whereas sandbags you really do. And it also seems to use up fewer recovery resources, so you have those left for the sandbags. So that's why I like body weight. You could argue that maybe if you just did fewer sets with heavy weight, it wouldn't actually use up more resources. But that's just been my experience. I feel more fresh for sandbags when I just do body weight.
All right. No, that makes perfect sense. Um, Before I ask the next question, are you sponsored by any sandbag company?
No, I'm not.
Okay. What's your favorite sandbag then?
Oh, it's the Iron Mine for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
and mainly because it's skinnier, so it's easier for me to shoulder it. So it makes it look like I'm stronger than I am. Yeah.
And do you prefer, because before sandbags used to just, or before when I first discovered them, they used to just be one design. You'd fill them up and you'd kind of like tape the top with like a
Mhm.
zip line or whatever, and it like literally looks like Santa's sack of toys, right?
Yeah.
Then they came out with like the double dual ply, whatever it's called, where it like there's that sack is already inside, and
Mhm.
then you close it, and then another zipper. It how could you explain to people watching the difference between those two sandbags? Advantages, disadvantages of both? Does it even matter?
Yeah, there's definitely a difference. I'd say the main one is what I found with the top knot style is they do seem to be a bit narrower than the ones with the Velcro and everything. And I haven't tried one myself, but I've talked with a few people who said the Cerberus top knot style is also a bit narrower than the ones with the Velcro. So that's the
Yep.
main difference that I see is that I feel like they're easier to maneuver because they're a little bit skinnier. But besides that, it does take a bit more maintenance to work with the top knot style because basically it's just a couple liner bags and then you put the sand in it and you zip tie it. Then you have this top knot thing that you tie. But because there's usually a lot of extra space in the bag, you do have to, between every set, I will like pick it up and I'll twist the top and I'll push it to the side a few times in different directions to pack the sand down, just to make sure it stays tightly packed. So with the Velcro ones, you don't have that problem as much.
Okay.
With the Cerberus bags, they tend to have a lot of space regardless of how much weight you put in them. Like if it's a 100 kg sandbag, even if you fill it up to like 250, somehow it just gets more space. I don't know how it does it. It stretches, but so you kind of have to push those ones around to get them into shape. But that's the main
Okay.
thing is just convenience. It's a bit more convenient to have the Velcro one just because you don't have to worry about the sand getting out of shape. But I do feel like it's a minor inconvenience. It seems like it'd be this huge thing and like the top knot would get in the way, but I haven't found it to be an issue really.
Okay. And last question, just this is in terms of because we're talking about picking sandbags and whatever. When it comes to, because you just touched upon something saying even if it says it can only fit 100 kilograms and you could end up getting, let's say, 250 pounds in, how full should a sandbag be? Should it be bursting at the seams, like as much sand as possible? Should there be like maybe 10% of the sand to be air? Sorry, of the sandbag to be air. What do you find in your experience is like the optimal amount of sand in a sand?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the exercise. If I'm doing the sandbag to shoulder, I want that thing completely as tight as possible so there's no give. And I have found that it's easier to get to that place with the top knot styles just because you can really pack it down and you can cinch that top further. Whereas with the fixed weight ones with the Velcro, it's hard to get to that point unless you actually just add more weight to the sandbag till it's completely full, I guess. I guess you could do that too, but it is kind of hard to get extra sand in that zipper past a certain point. For just general stuff, I would say if it has having just like a little bit of give, so you can wedge your arms into it a little bit, not too far, but just a small amount of space seems to be the best all around shape. I like that for the most things. I have a Rogue sandbag that's 200 pounds, and I filled it up to 200, and it's almost too compact for a lot of things. It's like a ball, and it's very hard to maneuver, and that's where the increased width makes it kind of a disadvantage to have it tightly packed because it's just so far out in front of you. Whereas if there's a little bit of space, you can almost bring that weight closer to you, if that makes sense, because you can dig your hands into it. So
Yes, that makes sense.
long answer short, I would say if you have just a bit of space so you can wedge your arms into it a little bit, but not so much that it's folding in half like a hourglass or something like that.
Because then I would say, let's say it just even weighs 100 pounds and it's a lot of sand is missing from the bag. I would say that's harder in its own right to lift up just
hmm
because it's flopping. It's like a dead weight person. It'll be flopping all over the
Yeah.
place, right?
Yeah, I feel like underfilled sandbags are like a thing all in their own. Uh, I've found the perfect ratio seems to be about 25% lighter than the total. Sorry, my dogs are barking again.
No, no, it's all good.
Uh, so if it's 100 pounds, filling it to 75 seems to be the sweet spot.
Okay.
Whereas if you go lower than that, it almost becomes too underfilled and it's almost impossible to maneuver. But if you want to use like an underfilled sandbag, I think it is a great accessory exercise for just building that base layer of rugged strength because it is hard to move that thing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. One thing, and this is a personal question, the last thing, it could also just be the brand. So I have a Cerberus, not one. I have, I believe then I have my 250 pound one is Cerberus as well. It's the double zipper, whatever it's
hmm
called. And then I have two from Bells of Steel. That's the 200 and the 150. And I used to have another 200 from Bells of Steel. Or sorry, my Bells of Steel one is actually 250, but it only fit 210 pounds of sand.
Huh.
But I used to have a 200 pound one that had 200 pounds of sand in it, and it burst.
Oh wow.
Have you broke any sandbags before?
No, I haven't. That's a
Really?
Yeah, I used to take my Iron Mine one and I just stored it in my shed and I would lift it to my shoulder and just drop it on like little sharp rocks and sticks and everything and it good as new. So I think something about the Iron Mine bags are just sturdy. And then the other ones I haven't really taken them outside and I was lifting on a wooden floor with a crawl space below, so I didn't really want to drop them. So that's probably played a big role in why I haven't. Uh,
Okay.
I have noticed the Cerberus bag, the on the underside, the seams seem to be a bit stretched out, but it hasn't been an issue. So I don't know if that will be a potential issue at some point, but yeah. So far I've been lucky. I'll probably go lift them today and break one. Now that I've said that.
My Bells of Steel one, it showed. This is in hindsight, but I didn't think there were any issues until one day I threw it onto my shoulder. Then when I threw it down, I noticed I heard like a louder than normal bang when it hit the floor,
hmm
and I didn't feel any sand come out of it. But then I lifted as I did like maybe one, maybe two, maybe three more reps. It was getting harder to put on my shoulder,
Oh
and
yeah,
then when it hit the floor, I noticed. And it wasn't where the zipper was, it was on the side. The liner was starting to come out. So no sand was leaking, but it was becoming like this elongated sandbag.
hmm
And it was just past my wife's like, "Oh, I could stitch that for you." I'm like, "No, this is
yeah,
done. You're not stitching this."
yeah, yeah. You never
Yeah,
want to throw that thing up and then just have sand rain down on you.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. But Yeah, that's all my questions. I enjoyed our chat. Hopefully people, well, I feel like we talked about the trend is already kind of setting there where people are not just focusing on like actual muscle groups. And it's not that I tell people this too. My channel's not like revolves around bodybuilding. Bodybuilding will always have its place. Single joint movements will always have their place.
Mhm.
As long as that's not your main focus and that's all you do, bodybuilding and hypertrophy training is more than fine. But it's people I think would be better off if they kind of expanded their maybe I'd say like understanding of what other tools are out there. And
Yeah.
I feel like the pendulum when I first started was about strength and performance, and then
Mhm.
somewhere in the late 2010s, it swung back towards just like aesthetics and bodybuilding.
Mhm.
And now I feel like we're swinging back towards the other
Yeah.
side
Just
because
happens over and over.
yeah, it will always happen. Always. There was a point in like let's say the 60s where people would only use barbells, only use
Mhm.
free weights, only use dumbbells. And then, oh no, oldie machines are better, right? So it's always going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think we're entering a nice time that not just strength, but strength with unconventional methods
Yeah.
are making a comeback.
Yeah.
So, to anyone watching this, make sure you subscribe to Cody's channel if you aren't already. Like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff to his channel. In addition to mine, Cody, do you have any last words for the audience?
Yeah, I'd said two things. One, if you're going for a heavy sandbag to shoulder, don't hold your breath because I almost died one time when a 250 bag fell on my head. Luckily, it was underfilled. Second thing, I'd say just be willing to give sport-specific training, even if you view it through the lens of a bodybuilder. Uh, anyone who's there's something different that happens when you start training for a specific sport, and it feels like life suddenly gains this entirely new purpose. And I wish everyone would experience it, and you could still build a lot of muscle by doing that. So that would definitely be the one thing is give it a chance, even if your sport's powerlifting, strongman, sandbag lifting. You can call it a sport if you want to. Just having something that guides your training and gives you that extra layer of purpose behind your training, I feel like it makes life more enjoyable, and that's the whole point, right? Is we're training forever. Why not enjoy the process?
All right, that's a great message. So, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget both of our channels, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And as always, have yourself a great day.